Hello, everyone. We are live. My name is Marcio Cots. Welcome to our data privacy class. We are going to start in a couple of minutes. So in just a few minutes, we'll start. So everybody will be able to join us, okay? Hello, everyone. Welcome to our data privacy online class. I would appreciate if you could just say hello so we would be sure that you can hear and see us. And we'll start our data privacy class on data protection impact assessment within a couple of minutes. Okay, guys, now I can see that you can hear me. That's very good. So, welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here with me. My name is Marcio Cots. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for GetGlobal International. GetGlobal International is a data privacy consulting company. We operate in the US, Europe, and Brazil. And today we are going to talk about the data protection impact assessment. We've been having a data privacy class for the past 2 months, every Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Last class was about privacy by design. This class is going, as I said, is going to be about the data protection impact assessment. And the next class will be a special class. So don't waste time. Schedule. Make all the arrangements to attend our next data privacy class, because definitely it's going to be a special online class, especially for those who wants to become DPOs, data protection officers. We are going to talk a little bit about how to become a data protection officer, a career that's becoming very important all around the world, especially for those who want to work in Europe, in India, in Brazil. US also is requiring a lot in many different professionals who are willing to work with data privacy. So definitely, you shouldn't miss our next online data privacy class. And as I have mentioned it today, we are going to talk about the data protection impact assessment. If you have never attended any of our previous classes, just let me explain how it works. I'm going to address a presentation here on today's topic. You feel free to ask as many questions as you want. You can send your question through our chat. So do it. And at the end of our presentation, we are going to answer those questions. So feel free to make questions and comments. And I think that we are set and ready to start our class, our today's class. So just let me share with you on my screen, and then we'll talk about the data protection impact assessment. For those who are familiar with the GDPR, have already heard about the data protection impact assessment. For those who are from the US and India, probably you haven't heard about the data protection impact assessment, but this is a wonderful tool to identify and mitigate personal data processing risks, and that's why we are going to talk about it today. The concept of data protection or by design pretty much has one specific goal, which is to previously and right from scratch to identify any particular risk for the data subject's right. So you can either say that the data protection impact assessment primary goal is to identify risks before you start processing personal data. So pretty much the data protection impact assessment and even the privacy by design needs to be integrated with the corporate data protection strategy. Some of you have already heard me talking about the corporate data protection strategy. It's one of the first things that we need to worry about as a DPO. It's pretty much to set what would be our strategy as an organization regarding data protection. So once we have defined the corporate data protection strategy, we definitely need to align this strategy with the data protection impact assessment and privacy by design. So pretty much we need to evaluate. We need, first of all, identify the risks, integrate the results, report the results, and evaluate. So it's pretty much a life cycle. We are going to talk also about the criteria for a data protection impact assessment. Just to let you know, here are some examples that we can find under the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. The GDPR doesn't have a specific list of conditions and situations that requires you to run an assessment, to run a data protection impact assessment, but it gives you an idea. It gives you at least 3 examples of situations when you would be, when a data protection impact assessment would be necessary. So those are just examples, okay? One of them stipulates that in case of a systematic and comprehensive assessment of personal aspects related to an individual based on automatic processing, including profile creation, would be one of these situations. So if you process personal data systematically and comprehensively, especially based on automatic processing, this would be one of the situations when you should run a data protection impact assessment. The second example that you will find under the GDPR is if you process a large scale of special categories of personal data related to convictions and crime offenses. So if your core business does it, if it processes a large scale of personal data related to convictions and criminal offenses, that would be the second example of a situation that you should run a data protection impact assessment. The third example that you will find in the GDPR is in the case of a systematic monitoring of an area accessible to the public on a large scale. So if, for example, you need to monitor one public area, an area that you will find people going and coming back, that would be also a situation that you should address a data protection impact assessment. But as I said, those are just examples. And we will see why those are just examples and not one closed list of situations. Very good. The first principle of data protection or privacy by design is the requirement that requires from the controller and in fact anyone processing personal data to anticipate and prevent privacy invasive events before they happen. So as I've said before, as I've mentioned it before, at the beginning of our conversation, of today's conversation, the idea, the main goal of privacy by design and even the data protection impact assessment is to previously, from scratch, identify any kind of risks in order to mitigate the risks. The GDPR includes the principle in Article 35, for example, where a type of processing, in particular using new technologies and take into account the nature, scope, context, and the purpose of the processing is likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons, the controller shall, prior to the processing, carry out an assessment of the impact of the envisaged processing operations on the protection of personal data. So I've said before, those situations that I have just mentioned before are just example, because the regulation says that if you are processing in a particular, using a particular technology and take into account the nature, the scope, the context, and purpose of the processing is likely to result in a high risk, you shall, prior to process, carry out an assessment, a data protection impact assessment. The GDPR does not require a data protection impact assessment to be carried out for every processing operation, but there is a very interesting white paper from the Working Party, Article 21, that you have already heard me talking about, and they detail what a data protection impact assessment is, and when you should conduct a data protection impact assessment. So for the Working Party, Article 29, a DPIA is a process designed to describe the processing, access, the necessity, and proportionality a processing and to help manage the risks to the rights and freedoms of natural persons resulting from the processing of personal data. A data protection impact assessment is only required when the processing, as we have mentioned it, is likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural person. So you as a data protection officer, you as a data privacy specialist should analyze the situation and identify if it would be likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural person. So that's why the three examples that I have mentioned, they are just examples, because the rule is a little bit more broader and says that any situation, in case you are processing personal data that is likely to result in a high risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons, would be a situation that you shall carry out a data protection impact assessment. As the GDPR does not define exactly what are the criteria, but provides some examples, and those examples are the ones that I have mentioned. So a data protection impact assessment can address a single processing operation or a set of similar processing operation. So this means that a single data protection impact assessment could be used to access multiple processing operations that are similar in terms of the risks presented, provided adequate consideration is given to the specific nature, scope, context, and the purpose of the processing. For example, let's say that your organization is going to change the procedure for anyone who wants to access any facility of your organization in different countries located in Europe. Let's say that your company's headquarters is in Brussels, but you also have an office in Madrid, one in London, and one in Berlin, for example. And the new process that anyone should follow to access the building, let's say that you are going to attend a meeting, is exactly the same. We are going to collect personal data every day, all day long. So it's going to be, we are going to process a large scale of personal data. I feel that we should carry out a data protection impact assessment. Should we do it in every building? Or if we do it for just the headquarters, would it be enough? Actually, you don't have to carry out a data protection impact assessment in every facility of your organization if the process is going to be the same. So the DPIA, the data protection impact assessment, can be addressed as a set of similar processing operations. And it means that you wouldn't have to do it in every country that you are going to have people attend a meeting in your office. Here's a life cycle of a data protection impact assessment. First of all, you need to describe the processing itself. Then you need to carry out the assessment of the necessity and the proportionality. We should identify if that would bring any risks to the individual's rights, to the data subject's rights. Once we have identified that there would be risks regarding that processing, we should measure envisage to demonstrate compliance. What would change in order to to mitigate those risks. And then we should carry out an assessment of the risks to the rights and freedoms. Once we do that, we should measure the advantage to address the risks. We should document and monitor and review. So it's a life cycle, because sometimes we don't, that's of course not what we would like, but sometimes we don't identify the risks right away. And once we see the process going on, we are able to identify things that we weren't able to previously identify. Once again, that's not the ideal scenario, but it happens. Once we have identified, even later, we should do anything in order to mitigate the risks. Okay, and as most of you know, under the GDPR, sometimes you even have to inform the DPIA, the Data Protection Authority, even before you starting processing personal data, if you have identified that that new product or the way you are going to process the personal data would bring some risks to individuals' rights. For those who are in the US, for example, the California Consumer Privacy Act, it doesn't require you to carry out a data protection impact assessment, but that definitely would be, good practice for you as a data protection officer, as a data privacy professional, because it helps you right away to identify any risks. I usually say that if you are starting a new project from scratch, you should apply privacy by design, because you would help to project to help the organization to build and this new product and new service. But if for some reason you are getting involved in analyzing this new product or new procedure, not from scratch, but it's still a project, but they already have the other areas, they already have an idea of what they want. If that's the situation, you were not involved from the beginning, but you got involved now, then it's not privacy by design that you should carry out, but a data protection impact assessment, first to identify what would be the risks of that idea that people brought to you, okay? But the goal is pretty much the same. So as I have mentioned it, the data protection impact assessment should be carried out prior to the processing. That's something that's stipulated in the GDPR. This is consistent with the data protection by design and by default principles, also under the GDPR. So the data protection impact assessment should be started as early as practical in the design of the processing operation. Even some of the processing operations are still unknown. Okay. The fact that the data protection impact assessment may need to be updated once the processing has actually started, it's not a valid reason for postponing or not carrying out a data protection impact assessment. In some cases, the data protection impact assessment will be an ongoing process. For example, where a processing operation is dynamic and subject to ongoing change. Carrying out a data protection impact assessment is a continual process, not a one-time exercise. There are a number of reasons to conduct a data protection impact assessment, such as the idea of prevention, as seen in one of the data protection by design principles, the obligations to document compliance, and others. In detail, a data protection impact assessment will help, for example, to prevent costly changes to process, redesign of systems, and termination of projects. Reduce the consequences of supervision and enforcement. improve the quality of data, improve service provision, and improve decision making. Also increase privacy awareness in the organization. It also improve project feasibility, improve communication with regarding to privacy and personal data protection, strengthen confidence and data subjects in the way personal data are processed in a privacy respect. The GDPR establishes the minimum characteristics, the features of a data protection impact assessment. For example, a description of the anticipated processing operations and the purpose of the operation, an assessment of the need and the proportionality of processing, an assessment on the risks to the rights and freedoms of data subjects, also the measures envisaged to address the risks or demonstrates compliance with the regulation. Very good. Here's just examples. Here's very interesting tips. If you want to access, for example, some data protection impact assessment templates, maybe you can go to the Spanish DPIA, Data Protection Authority. They have very good samples. They even have a software, a free software that will help you in carrying out the data protection impact assessment. You input some data, and they will help you to analyze the impact of that situation. Also, the English Data Protection Authority, they provide some instructions, checklists, and templates for data protection impact assessment. And also the French authority, it has a toolkit for GDPR, and also a spreadsheet that would help you in carrying out the data protection impact assessment. Some professionals have become specialized in data protection impact assessment just because it's a very good procedure to carry out, mostly to help the company in not losing money, wasting time. So definitely, I would recommend you to study as much as you could data protection impact assessment. Excellent. So let me see if you guys have any question regarding what I've just addressed during our presentation. So feel free to ask as many questions as you want. There is one question here. Everything you ever wanted to know about how to become a data protection officer, but didn't know where to start asking questions. Yeah, that's right. So feel free, guys, to ask any questions that you want about the data protection impact assessment. Many companies are, carrying out data protection impact assessment, even in the US, mostly because it, as I said before, it helps you to identify the risks right away. So by doing that, you are going to gain so many things. Like you're going to change the corporate culture, for example. People are going to be aware of the necessity of taking care of privacy right from the beginning. People are gonna learn how to do it and help you as a data protection professional in taking care of data privacy. There is one question here. What's the typical duration of a data protection impact assessment? It depends. It depends. If it's a big project that we identify that we are going to process large scale of personal data, that's going to take longer. Let me say that if it's a very complicated a new product. The product, let me say that it's a project that involves IoT, Internet of Things. We should learn what that device is going to do, how it's going to process the personal data, why it's going to do it, is it going to share the data with some other device, and so on. That would be, a long project because you need to identify so many things. But sometimes, as I've mentioned, it's some simple things like we need to change the procedure to hosting guests for our meetings in our organization. That's not a difficult project. We just need to identify how would be the best way to process the individual's personal data in order to make them access the building and attend the meeting. Would we have a receptionist just asking questions out loud, like, what's your name? What's your full name? What's your social security number? Or things like that. It doesn't feel for me, it doesn't look like the best way to do it, but it doesn't it doesn't seem to be a very difficult project. Do you know what I mean? So it depends. It depends on how complex this project is regarding what kind of data we are going to process, and how different process this project may have. Can you provide examples of gaps identifying during the data protection impact assessment? If you are aware of the obligations under the GDPR or even under the CCPA, for example, the principle of purpose. If someone wants to do something, like we want to collect data so people will be able to access the building to attend our meeting, do we need to ask them, for example, do we need to ask the social security number for that? I don't think so. I think the name and maybe one way of contact, like your telephone number or email, that would be enough. So if we are collecting more data, or if the company wants to collect more data than necessary for the purpose, that would be a risk. So we would identify as a risk and suggest to change it. Let's say that we are going to collect sensitive data, but maybe we identify that we could do the pseudo anonymization. We wouldn't leave the data accessible for anyone. We have identified that the way the company wants to process the data is not the best way. Maybe we should change and make it just accessible for those who really needs to access the data. So, for example, let's say that the front end, the screen that you see should or shouldn't identify the data. We could leave it blanket, or even, with some X mark, and just let it be accessible for those who really needs to access the data. So those are just examples of gaps that you would identify carrying out a data protection impact assessment. So a data protection impact assessment is pretty much all the risks that you are going to identify regarding the legal obligations that you already know. So that's why our data protection officer course has the foundation, which are pretty much the legal obligations, and the practitioner that shows you how to help the organization comply with the legal obligations. So I feel that if you guys want to really become a data protection specialist, you not even need to understand the legal obligations, the CCBA, the General Data Protection, the European General Data Protection Regulation, the Brazilian General Data Protection Law, the India Data Protection Bill, but also how to help the organization. What would be the best methodologies to help the organization comply with those obligations? One more question: does a data protection impact assessment depends on which data processing is based on an electronic system or not? Not really. As we've mentioned it during our class, one of the examples that you will find in the GDPR is that if you are processing personal data automatically, it might be a good idea to carry out a data protection impact assessment. But definitely we can process personal data and putting the data subject's rights in risks, doing it manually. So it doesn't need to be electronically to make you obligated to carry out a data protection impact assessment. Even if you are doing this manually, under certain circumstances, you would also need to carry out a data protection impact assessment. One more question here: what kind of knowledge do you think is necessary to gather together during the construction of the data protection impact assessment? That's a very good question. Definitely the DPO or the data privacy consultant. He's the one who has learned the methodologies to identify and mitigate data privacy risks. But sometimes the data privacy professional needs to get involved in some other areas. And that depends on the kind of project that we are going to deal with. For example, let's say that you are the DPO working for Fujitsu, IBM, Apple. These guys are innovative. That's the core business of the organization. So probably you will definitely have to get some engineers involved in these data protection impact assessment, because you will have to understand and be aware of how the devices work, and then identify what would be the risks. But let's say that you work for a very big e-commerce like Amazon or Alibaba. They process large scale of personal data, but mostly because of digital marketing. So it's not so much on device hardware, more on how they are going to run their digital marketing campaign. So maybe in this case, you should get involved the marketing team and not the engineers. So it depends. You need to identify what kind of project we are talking about, and both examples, they definitely will process personal data and they may put the individual's rights in risk. So under both examples, we would have to carry out a data protection impact assessment, but you would need different teams just because we're talking about different projects. Okay? Very good, guys. So if you guys don't have any other questions, once again, I would invite you to attend our next data privacy class. It's going to be a special data privacy class. It's going to be online this coming Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. For those who want to attend, to make part of our DPO online course, you are going to be able from this coming Monday to enroll in. So we have been receiving emails and messages from you guys asking when is it going to be the next online course. So the time has come, and it's going to be next week. Usually, it takes only 3 days to you know to have full class. So don't waste time. Probably I'm pretty much sure that the price is going to be the same price that we have charged for the previous classes. It's $380. So if you want to become a data privacy officer, data protection officer, don't waste time. And we are going to let you guys enroll in for the foundation course and the information security course. So that means that you would be able to get at least 2 out of 3 certifications that you need to get to be an ICSIN certified DPO. Okay. If you guys have any questions about our DPO online course, this coming Monday is the right time to ask any questions that you may have. Okay. There is one more question here. Who do you share the DPO report internally and externally? Very good. You share the report with everyone in the company that you feel that should be aware of the risks. Remember that under the GDPR, transparency is one of the principles. Externally, sometimes you must share it with the DPA, the Data Protection Authority. So that's in the GDPR, the circumstances when you should do it. Looking forward to this special edition on the Brazilian holiday. Yes, that's right. For those who are Brazilian, this coming Monday, it's going to be Independence Day. But this program, just to let you guys know, the last class we had more than 10 students. Most of them were from the US and Canada. There was one girl, she was originally from China, but she was living in India. We had a girl from Germany. So people from everywhere, just because, as it says, our slogan, data privacy nowadays is global. So many people want to become data privacy professionals. So don't waste time. Our online course is very good. The content is very well structured. Almost 100% of our students got the certification. They were able to take the ICSIN tests and were able to get the certification. The other day, I just learned that a guy from Turkey who had attended our previous course was able to get the certification. So that's very nice. So it would be great to have you guys attending our program and becoming a data privacy specialist. Of course, you're going to find a lot of content on the internet, but in a structured way, in a way that you are going to be able to take the exams. Just because we are an official ICSIN training partner, that would be a little bit more difficult. And sometimes you get content from the internet, but doesn't mean that it's the right content. Do you know what I mean? So definitely, I would encourage you to attend our online courses. Okay, guys, it was a pleasure having you here today. Don't waste time. Spread the word around. Let your colleagues and friends know that we are going to have a special edition of our data privacy online class next Monday, this coming Monday. Okay? So see you then, guys.